Welcome to Comcast TV show Operation Freedom. Our show is about American veterans. Program sponsors are Freedom Museum, Manassas VFW Post 7589, and Vietnam Veterans of America Chapter 617. We thank them for their support. I'm your host, Bradshaw. Today we're pleased to have with us Army veteran Fred Tompkins. Fred, welcome to the program.
Thanks, sir.
First, you're going to talk about your latest veteran community activity, organize a Veterans Parade in November. Tell us about it. I'm looking forward to it. Go ahead.
Okay. This was an effort that was started by Gunny Lewis, the commander of the American Legion here. And from what I understand, although I wasn't present at the time, that Gunny had realized that there had never been a Veterans Day parade in Manassas and was rather amazing and a bit set back by it. And so he said, we will have a Veterans Day parade in 2009, even if it's 5 guys marching around the American Legion. And so the parade committee met, I think, the end of last year for one committee meeting, and then started again up in the springtime to put this together. And we were fortunate that we were able to get a number of the folks who were involved and have been involved for a number of years in the St. Patrick's Day parade to help us with the committee and help us organize and figure out what the things are we're supposed to do from an operations viewpoint, from a logistics viewpoint, and what kind of people we need to support this thing. Because it takes 200 or 300 people to put on a parade like this. Yeah. And then get all the permits, get the insurance, and those sort of things that go with it is quite a deal. As a result, because of the level of interest, the VFW 7589 and the Vietnam Veterans 617 came in and participated with this thing. And although the Legion is the lead organization and put up some of the front money that's necessary to get the thing going. And we've been very successful in getting things. We finally got organized. It took us for a while. It was a group of volunteers that didn't have any idea what they're doing, except we're going to put on a parade, and had no idea what the magnitude of putting something like that on was. Yeah. So we've been very fortunate. We decided that when we started looking for a Grand Marshal, I was part of the Grand Marshal Committee, subcommittee, and we said, well, let's go get Willard Scott, because he's a World War II veteran, you know, and he's a famous squad. And we kept thinking, wait, but this is about Manassas. This isn't about Virginia. It's not about Washington, D.C. It's not about a national thing. This is about the greater Manassas area, and we want to keep it confined to that. So what we finally decided to do was that we would honor all veterans, but we would specifically identify the World War II veterans as Grand Marshals as a group, and that whoever the oldest, obviously living, participating veteran would be the Grand Marshal leading off the parade. And that's the way we've set it up for this year. But we do have, as I say, a lot of participation from other groups as well. And in fact, we can give you some of the ideas, some of who we have in there. Obviously, the World War II veterans are the new ones. Some of the musical entries are the pipe and drum corps from Northern Virginia Firefighters Emerald Society, the D.C. Police, Fairfax Sheriff's Coalition, Lytton Hall Fife and Drums, the Seton Drum Line. The military entries and military associate entries and organizations are the American Legion Post 10, the Legionnaires, the Riders, and the Auxiliary, because they have three major activities are going in that sort of thing. We were also fortunate that the Freedom Museum out at the airport was recently recipient of a hull of a B-25 that's in pristine condition and is on a trailer. Fortunately for us, they can't put it into the museum until some later on, because they're going to have to knock out a wall to get it in.
Because it's a cockpit.
Yeah, because it's a whole cockpit, including the turret, the top turret, machine turret on it, and it's got the 30 caliber machine guns or 50 caliber machine guns on it. So it's in pretty good condition, and it's towable. So that'll be in the parade as a piece of it. In fact, we'll show you a picture of it in a few moments, based upon another activity that's associated with the parade regarding the World War II veterans. We're also fortunate in that we're able to get a National Guard unit from Richmond, which is an air unit, and they're going to do a Black Hawk flyover with 2 Black Hawks to start off the parade, which is kind of neat, and that's already set in concrete. The Irish Brigade Color Guard, the 7th Cavalry Color Guard is going to be there. what's the name, of Custer's old unit, 7th Cavalry, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and Fort Belvoir is going to have 100 soldiers marching from the engineers, plus the appropriate number of NCOs to herd them around.
Full uniform.
Full uniform.
Good.
I don't know if it'll be combat uniform now, but it'll be in uniform.
And
honor guard to go along with that as
Good.
part of that. There's a local data processing unit, reserve unit, that just came back from deployment, and they're going to be marching in the parade as well. Plus, we have some World War II and Civil War reenactor organizations. In historical groups, we've got out in Nokesville, there is a military vehicle museum, and they're going to be having some vehicles in it. We're not going to be running any tanks down through the middle of Manassas. There was, interesting, that rumor was floating around this last weekend, and we had to reassure Mayor Parrish that that wasn't going to be the case, that there was none of those sort of things. Plus, we've got some high school junior ROTC units, other local dignitaries. The Hoggettes are going to be here for anybody who's interested in seeing the Hoggettes up face to face. As of Saturday, the number of units we had are 46 that have committed. There's some others that are in negotiation, like we're negotiating with the Third Infantry Division from D.C. that do the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, but they can't commit until up to about 4 weeks beforehand because of their schedules and that sort of stuff. So there's a number of organizations. I will say that we're keeping this purposely down to about 60 units to stay hopefully within about an hour, which is the time frame that we promised the city we would stay within, but also give us a better comfort feeling that we're going to pull this inaugural parade off with some level of success, so we can start an annual type kind of event like this.
Well, good. Now, if somebody wants to contribute money or want to know more about the parade, you've got a website, right?
Yes, we have a website. It's ManassasVeteransParade.org, O-R-G. Okay. And they can go on there. They can also go to the American Legion Post 10 website, which is American Legion Post 10, I believe it is, .org as well, or go to www.americanlegion.org, okay, and that'll take you to the national, and you can get down to the chapter from there. And there is some information on there. We do have a program that we're putting together with advertisements in it. We're looking for sponsors from anywhere from $250 up to $2,000 or better. We've had some of those come in already. You can go as low as, for business, $40 for a business card ad, as long as you can send us a JPEG file or a digital file with the thing in it. And also for personal ads, if you want to honor your father, your grandfather, aunts, uncles, whatever it happens to be, you can put a small line in there for like $10. Okay. So you can put a personal message in there for a fairly small amount. That information and the forms are also on the website, ManassasVeteransParade.org.
Good. And now, the people want to come to it, tell them what the parade, where the old town is 28 Center Street, right?
Yeah, it's going down Center Street, the wrong way down Center Street.
They closed it down.
Yeah, we're going to start at Quarry, come around Prescott to Center Street. It'll go down past City Hall, okay, past the business district there, and it'll turn left at the Harris Pavilion, and it'll break up shortly after the pavilion. What we're doing, the World War II veterans, there will be a set of bleachers and reviewing stand alongside the pavilion. The the World War II veterans, excuse me, I'm a little out of time frame there.
We just got to keep marching.
Yeah, is that we'll take those from the parade as soon as they come by and put them in the stands. Those that can't march will be in the stands already, so there'll be a separate stand, okay, that'll identify the World War II veterans separately. All the units will be announced at the beginning of the parade. When the first unit gets there, we'll stop the parade for a moment, do the national anthem. Okay, Ginger Harvey, who is the son of a previous Darrell Harvey, who's also involved in the parade. Ginger's also the publicity chair for the parade as well, and doing an outstanding job of doing that. We'll be singing the national anthem. She's a professional entertainer and sings in Nashville and sort of thing. So it's going to be a good lineup, and perhaps just to give you an indication of the kind of response we're getting to this thing, we have identified in the neighborhood of 90 to 100 World War II veterans still living in the greater Manassas area. And the Legion hosted a luncheon this last Sunday for those veterans. We had contacted around 80 of them. About 32 indicated they were going to show up. the tally ended up being 46 showing up,
That's
and
right.
only one out of the 32 that we identified didn't show up. So that was a pretty good response, and
Good.
in fact, there's a picture here with the entire group of the 45 or 46 of the World War II veterans, ladies and gentlemen, in front of the B-25 hull that will be in the parade as well. So you've got an idea of at least one of the highlights of the parade that's coming along.
Good, good. And at the time...
It's 11 o'clock.
11 to 12.
It's 11 to 12 on November the 7th, which is a Saturday morning, okay? And kicking off directly at 11 o'clock, coming down Prescott to Center Street.
So folks got to come. And just one other thing. They're not crossing 234.
No.
They're stopping short.
Yes, yeah, we're turning at the Harris Pavilion there on Grant Avenue.
Okay.
Right past Prospero's bookstore. Okay, right
Okay.
there at the corner there, and the BB&T Bank, that intersection there. Okay, and we'll be turning left off of Center Street, which goes over the railroad tracks right by the train station.
Yep. And no train ought to come through that.
We don't have a whole lot of control over that one, unfortunately.
Okay.
So
Well, very good. Well, I hope I'll be out there, and lots of people, and we encourage them to set that time aside and to honor the veterans, and it's also for Veterans Day.
yes, yes.
Which,
please come out and honor and help us honor the veterans, and with some special attention to the guys from the greatest generation, as they're well known. Yeah, we appreciate their
Well,
their
thank you
service.
on that, and that's part of your community activity, and that will go back to your early career. I want to get that out. You came in the Army in, well, first you were born in Cortland, New York,
Yes.
1938,
Yes.
and raised in the Finger Lakes region of northern New York. Your father was a factory worker for Smith Corona.
Yes.
I still got one of those typewriters.
So do I.
Typewriters. Mother, homemaker, and a tailor and seamstress.
Yes.
And you married Heisei in
Heisei.
1964 when you were in active duty.
Yes, in Okinawa,
You
yes.
have a son. Now you came, you volunteered for the Army.
Well,
The draft was on, you
yes,
volunteered.
kind of. Okay. I graduated from high school in 1956 and had applied and got accepted to what was then known as Cortland State Teachers College, now known as the State University of New York at Cortland.
Okay.
It's when the schools went from normals to state colleges to being part of a university system. And they had just started a new program to certify junior high math teachers. It was interesting because they hadn't quite figured out the curriculum yet and where to put people, so I was taking classes with elementary education school teachers when I was in these music classes singing do, re, mi's and singing scales. And I was at the same time, I was also in sociology classes with phys ed seniors. So it was kind of interesting, but I came to realize that teaching junior high math was not probably something that was in my future, and it just didn't agree with me too well. And I was not doing academically well. High school was way too easy for me, and I never learned to study. And this is where the evidence started to show up.
Yeah.
And since I had less than a 2.0 GPA at the end of my 3 semesters and 2 semesters of academic probation, it was obvious to me that the selective service system was going to be knocking on my door any day now with that nice little letter.
Come with us.
And so I went down and talked to the Army recruiter, an interesting fellow by the name of Quillian Underwood from Monroe, Louisiana, who was a super salesman. I mean, he could have sold used cars to anybody in the world. And so he took me up to Syracuse, and they gave me some tests, and I scored rather well on them. And he said, I got a guy you got to talk to. So he took me into this room with a desk, 2 chairs, and a staff sergeant by the name of O'Brien. And he said to me, he said, well, son, he said, I can only take 6 people from the state of New York outside of New York City and the Buffalo immediate areas. Now, I got my quota for February. This was on Valentine's Day, by the way, 1958. And he said, but you got some really good scores here, son. He said, but you're 56 on the waiting list, but you got some really good scores. So when I kept talking about all this neat stuff that this organization does, but didn't tell me anything, but I didn't realize that he wasn't telling me anything at the time. It was just an average, hey, this has got to be I'm going to be a spy. So I signed the contract, and they took me in, and that's how I got in the Army. And how I got into the business I got into was one of those twists of fate that somebody comes and grabs you and said, we want you. When I was in basic, they tried to talk me out of it. I had the second highest officer candidate test score in my basic training company. The guy who had the highest was a draftee, so they didn't mess with him. And there was a executive officer by the name of Freddie K. Wilson, who was a OCS Airborne Ranger, who would pull me out of formation 2 or 3 times a week and take me off for a cup of coffee somewhere and try to get me to give up my commitment to this thing that I didn't know anything about and go and be an infantry officer in OCS. Of course, this was after the last RIF in World War II of Korean veterans, so it was kind of a calm, quiet, peaceful period in 1958. And, if I'd been to Vietnam, I probably definitely wouldn't have thought about it. Yeah. So anyway, so that's how it all started.
Very good. So you came in, and of course you go to that basic training in Fort Dix. Tell us what Fort Dix, New Jersey.
That was another interesting time too, because I went in on the 12th of March. By the way, I could only go in on Wednesdays when they finally selected me. Okay, and I had to be either the 12th or the 19th because it was a consolidated induction station in Syracuse, and so they allocated different days of the week out to these centralized stations throughout the state. And so I went on the 12th. It was like 60 degrees outside. The sun was shining. Got on a train. Okay, showed up at Fort Dix the next morning. 70 degrees outside. We're out running around, getting clothing and all that sort of stuff. Wake up the morning of the 14th, and there's 4 feet of snow on the ground. There's no electricity. We're in pre-World War II buildings. The snow is blowing through the buildings. We're putting on all the old woolen underwear we can find, top coats and everything else we can get on just to stay warm. So that was interesting. And as I say, and then Freddie K. Wilson would pull me out of formation. I probably took maybe 70% of basic training while I was there, because so it really didn't get totally immersed in that. And I think I spent one night in the field during that entire period.
How was that?
Yeah. So and then off to Fort Devens, Massachusetts, which was the home of the Army Security Agency Training Center and School,
right,
which is what I enlisted for.
That's your first duty assignment?
Yeah, it was my first duty assignment.
Okay.
It was up there. And it was actually a screening place. They had selected me to go to Crypto Repair and Jam School at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, which was repairing crypto equipment for comm centers and that sort of stuff. And that's what they offered me. And I had to be engaged at the time, and had already talked to the local school system about setting up a job for my fiancée who was going to be graduating soon. And so I wanted to stay at Fort Devens. So the only option I had at that, I really wanted to go to language schools, what I wanted to do, but I didn't have a high enough score for that day. Okay. The next day they were taking guys with scores, 12 points less than mine. Yeah. And so I ended up being called a duty soldier, okay, which you go over and you cut the grass, you stoke the furnaces and that sort of stuff. But when I walked in and reported in, they said, anybody can type. Well, growing up in a typewriter town, you knew how to type, so they called me on Monday morning. I gave a typing test, and they made me an admin NCO for the first sergeant. And I got to be, as a private E2 with no stripes on my shoulder, I got to be the acting investigating NCO for accidents, because they were 30 days late on 7 different accident reports.
Good.
So I had to, and they were these double legal size forms, okay, and they had to be done in 9 copies, 2 originals, and no strikeovers and no mistakes. Okay, it took me about 2 weeks to finish things. But then I was talking one weekend with one of the other fellows there who worked in the training aids department at the school, which did slides and view graphs and all that sort of stuff. And they needed somebody in the photo lab. Well, I had been a professional photographer in high school and in college and used to photograph weddings and that sort of stuff. So they called me down one day to talk to the NCOIC down there. I talked to him, and a war began between the NCOIC and the first sergeant. And then it went up to the division chief, who was a captain, and the company commander, who was a captain. And then it went up to the deputy director of the logistics unit, which the training aids fell under, okay, and the battalion commander, okay. And it finally ended up, I get transferred down, and now I'm on, okay, you know what kind of list for the first sergeant, okay, because they stole me from him.
But so, you're in photos lab.
Yeah. And I ended up working as a photographer, a photo lab technician, audiovisual aids technician, showing movies and running equipment and that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then I got sent to Okinawa as a photo lab technician with the Army Security Agency. The technology we had back then was called radio fingerprinting, which the cellular industry has just figured out that every transmitter has a unique signature. Yeah. And this was brand new at that time. We used a light-sensitive tape, paper tape, to photograph an oscillograph. And we could actually figure this, and I had actually worked with a guy at Fort Devens, the doctor, who figured out how to come up with a classification system to scale these so we could uniquely identify these transmitters.
It's like a fingerprint.
It is like a fingerprint, and it has a classification system.
Yeah.
And we were able to track Chinese communication, Chinese military communications, and where the transmitters are located. One, we could identify the locator, and then we did direction finding with 5 stations located throughout the Far East and intercepting them. At the same time, we were copying the traffic through intercept. We're doing a direction finding and doing a radio fingerprinting.
Right.
And I ended up working in the direction finding thing, and got out of the dark room,
Yeah.
and into the light, as it were.
But you were there 5 years, so
Yes.
you're a homesteader.
Exactly. I had 17 months left in the Army when I went over there, and came home 5 years later. I did come home when my father passed away after I'd been there about 2 years.
Yeah.
But I kept extending because it was just such a great place. I really loved the work I was doing.
Sure.
Probably one of the interesting stories, one of the substations that was subordinate to us was in Korea. And they had a whole new bunch of new people up there, just the way that the transfer cycle worked. And they were a little local DF set that were looking over the Chinese up on the 38th parallel. Well, they kept putting the Chinese down below the 38th parallel, which caused all kinds of havoc throughout the whole community in the Far East.
Yeah.
So they kept sending the stuff down to us to replot it and do some things with the least squares deviation, some more advanced mathematics and those kind of things about it. So we did it, and then there was a briefing coming in, and we just had a promotion. The ops officer went up as the executive officer. We had a brand new ops officer.
Yeah.
He was screwing up the briefing something royally. So the XO steps in, says, "Excuse me, gentlemen," and I'm sitting at a plotting table with my back to all these people in back of me, not knowing who they were, except I knew they were, some fairly powerful people.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm getting done, and I'm showing what we're doing, and the fact that they really weren't there, and doing all these overlays on top of maps, and showing what we were doing, all this mathematics.
So they were there.
Yeah, and he said, "No, they're there. They're where they've always been. They haven't moved anywhere." And as I turned around on my stool, to ask if there were any questions, I looked into 24 stars. There's a CG of the 8th Army, the Commanding General, U.S. Army Pacific, the Chief Naval Officer of the Pacific, and all that stuff. There's like 8 or 10 officers there, and there was 24 stars standing there. And you talk about somebody who was flat. I was a E4 at the time. It scared the devil out of me. First time I'd ever seen a general officer in my life.
Yeah. And there are 4 stars in there.
Yeah, there was 4 stars and 3 stars.
Yeah. Neat.
Anyway,
So you spent 5 years there, and that's. Did you meet your wife there?
Yes.
Okay.
That's where I met my wife. We got married over there, and the Army Security Agency decided they didn't need my services any longer, and they took some of the special accesses I had beyond my TS clearance. Since I'd been on the island so long, they couldn't reassign me on the island because I was actually over the maximum tour for other people, and so. They sent me back, and that's where I got back to Fort Holabird. And they took me out of the Army Security Agency and sent me to the Counterintelligence Corps.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
Counterintelligence. Okay, and you went to Holabird, and you stayed there 2 years. Well, it's interesting. You go to Vietnam.
Yes.
And that's your first time to Vietnam.
Yes, I went to Imagery Interpretation School, and I had a choice of going to Korea, up on the DMZ, in 1966 when they were shooting up there, but they weren't giving you any extra pay, and they weren't giving you any tax deductions. So I had made staff sergeant. I was an E6. And so I went down, since I had worked for the Intelligence Personnel Division, I knew the guy who handles all the assignments.
Right.
So I went down and opened the assignment books and said, all right, I want an assignment where I know I can make E7 and a sergeant first class. And so that's when I picked a Vietnam unit that was in Saigon. I was under travel restriction. I'm going to say I couldn't leave Saigon anyway. So I picked the unit I was assigned to, got there, made E7, and in fact, here's I think one of the pictures I have here. This is one we forgot to show. Is that this is what a basic training at a ripe old age of 20 years old. Yes. And
very good.
Then when I was an operations NCO in Vietnam, and where I made, this is right after I made E7, and I gone from being an NCOIC of a team to being an operations NCO over all the teams. There's 6 teams. I had 160 people working for me. $6 million worth of equipment. We were running 300 intelligence projects per month. Yeah,
and that's where you got your Purple Heart. Tell us about that.
I was in Vietnam. I was in country for 33 days. We used to eat at a hotel in Saigon, and I can't remember the name of the hotel now, but nothing had happened since May of '66 when they blew one of the officers' hotels, where the MP officers stayed. I think it was the Mayflower, and this was about a block and a half away. right next door to a Shell gas station where all the buses collected people to take them out to MACV headquarters and out to Thompson Air Force Base for their assignments, the ones that were built in Saigon. And I'd been out there and I'd been standing on the curb for 9 mornings in a row. And for some reason that morning, October the 17th at approximately 06:37, I decided to have an extra half a cup of coffee, so I was about 5 minutes later than I normally got. And there was another guy standing on the curb on my place, an Air Force Staff Sergeant. So I stood behind the concrete-filled barrels for the first time.
Yeah.
And I wasn't there. I'd opened up my newspaper and just started to read newspaper, and all of a sudden this big kaboom happened. And I found myself wedged in between one of these big refrigerated units and the building, okay, and I scraped myself all to pieces getting out of there, but it blew out part of my eardrum from the concussion because it was only about 20 feet away. And it killed 5 people.
Including that guy standing on the curb?
No, he lost his right arm and half his right leg.
Ooh.
Okay, so it was fate was in there. Okay,
Good
so anyway, so it as I say, I lost the hearing in my right ear for a period of time. It's still partially gone, and that's it was what we would call an IED today.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a home-rig claymore.
They get you any place in there, and okay. After that, you returned to the States for Orange Coast.
Yeah, I went back to Fort Holabird as an instructor, and took over a leadership school as a first sergeant, so I got a little first sergeant experience. Was picked to go on civil schooling for 2.5 years at a terrible place in Newport Beach, California.
Oh, it's
for 2.5 years as a college student. Went back to Vietnam as a computer programmer.
And you were with the 32nd Medical Depot Medical Automated Data System Group.
Right, yeah. It was a computer...
all computerized.
Yeah, we did all the computer ordering and the supplies for all the medical materials for the Free World Forces in Vietnam.
Okay.
It's a $100 million supply system.
Woo!
And the interesting thing was we were in the process of pulling back from Vietnam at that point in '72, and I got to shut it down and convert it back to a manual system, which is something that most IT guys never get to do.
Never get to do.
Yeah. And maybe that's why they stuck me in computer security later on.
Yeah, because the war was over, supposedly, 15 March of '73. So you were out...
No, 75. It was 30 April of '75 when they made the last helicopter took off from the embassy.
Oh, no, okay.
Yeah.
That's when we... But
yeah,
I'm saying the war was over.
Yeah, 73.
73, okay.
Yeah,
I thought I was getting the wrong date. Okay, yes. And because, yes, in '75, the North Beach VC took over the whole place.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, we're getting down close on time now. Got 1 minute. Do you have any reflections on... You've been 2 tours in Vietnam. Any reflections on the war, or personal reflections?
Well, it's interesting. Unfortunately, I don't know, for whatever reasons, I know a lot of folks who, were around where people were killed around them and walked away and have this guilt feeling. Fortunately, I've been able to rationalize it or whatever. I've been able to live with it because of the fact that I believe that life is predestined. And when it's your time, it's your time. There is little or nothing you can do about it. It doesn't make it difference between good, bad, indifferent, or whatever. When it's your time to go, it's your time to go. And fortunately, it wasn't my time.
It wasn't your time. Okay. Yeah. I say that time has flown by fast. Your other life after service, but we'll just take care of the service. I want to thank our sponsors, Freedom Museum, VFW Post 7589, and Chapter 617 of Vietnam Veterans of America. Thank you, Fred Tompkins, being with us today, and thank you for sharing your life experience in the Army. Fascinating, as ever. And I hope you're enjoying your retirement, and thank you for your service to America.
Thank you.
And this is your host, Brad Bradshaw. Thank you for being with us today, and goodbye to wherever you are.